So, how does one person's, obsessive drive build a global empire, then nearly shatter it with its own weight, and then somehow find a way to reinvent it for a totally new era? Well, today we're going to unpack the incredible story of Bill Gates and the company he built from the ground up, Microsoft. All right, so we're going to walk through 5 key chapters. We'll start with the teenage programming prodigy, then see how he built an empire on a bluff. After that, we dive into an era of just total domination, followed by a decade of some pretty costly missteps. And finally, we'll look at the complete reboot of the entire system. So let's get right into it, starting at the very beginning. Okay, so where does it all begin? Well, like a lot of these legendary tech stories, it starts with a brilliant, kind of rebellious teenager who looked at computers and didn't just see tools, he saw a world to be conquered. So picture this, a young Bill Gates at Lakeside School. He gets so obsessed with the school's brand new computer that he and his friends, well, they burn through all their allotted time super fast. What do? Naturally, he just hacks the system to get more. But that wasn't the only reason he was bending the rules. Yup, you heard that right. The school actually asked him to write a class scheduling program, and he tweaks the code to make sure he was placed in classes with, and I'm quoting here, a disproportionate number of interesting girls. I mean, it's a bit mischievous, sure, but it perfectly shows that clever, rule-bending mindset he would later bring to the entire business world. So you gotta ask, where did that intense drive even come from? Well, turns out, his parents actively encouraged this super competitive environment at home. And we're not just talking about board games here. This was about building a powerful winner-take-all mentality that would literally become the cornerstone of Microsoft's entire corporate culture. And that competitive spirit, it led him to make some of the most audacious, frankly gutsy bluffs in the history of business, securing massive deals for products that, well, didn't even exist yet. The whole mantra was basically pretend to have what you don't. Promise it now, figure out how to build it later. It all started back in '75. Gates and Paul Allen see this new computer, the Altair 8800, on a magazine cover. So what do? They call the manufacturer, a company called MITS, and offer to sell them a basic interpreter for the machine. The only tiny problem? They hadn't written a single line of code. Somehow, they pulled it off with MITS. But the real masterpiece, the move that literally built an empire, was the IBM deal. See, IBM needed an operating system for its new PC, and fast. Gates, in what's now a legendary move, promised them one he absolutely did not have. He then scrambled, licensed something called a quick and dirty operating system, or QDOS, from a small Seattle company, cleaned it up a bit, and licensed it to IBM as MS-DOS. And here's the absolute masterstroke. IBM got its operating system, sure, but Microsoft kept the rights to license MS-DOS to everyone else, any other computer manufacturer out there. So, in one single move, they basically created and then completely dominated the entire software market for personal computers. The goal was a PC in every home, and every single one of them would be running Microsoft software. Okay, so once they had control of the operating system, Microsoft entered its next phase, just absolute domination. This is where that relentless competitive drive we talked about was unleashed on the entire industry, and most famously, of course, against Apple. And this right here shows you the fundamental difference between the two companies. For Microsoft, the goal was simple: get on every single desk. It was all about quantity, about market share, even if the product wasn't perfect. Apple, though, they were obsessed with the user experience, with quality over quantity. We're talking two completely different philosophies led by two absolute titans of the industry. And Steve Jobs, well, he never minced words about his rival. He famously said that Microsoft's only problem was they just have no taste. And he meant that in a big way. For him, they lacked the artistry, the elegance that he felt was essential for great tech. He saw their stuff as just functional but totally soulless. But hey, Gates gave as good as he got. He'd fire back that Jobs didn't really know anything about engineering, that he was just a super good marketer. He respected the marketing genius for sure, but he saw Jobs as someone who just didn't get the deep technical work that it took to build the software that was actually, powering the world. This rivalry was deeply personal, and it really defined an entire generation of technology. Eventually, though, this drive to win at all costs crossed a line. To conquer the brand new world of the internet, Microsoft bundled its web browser, Internet Explorer, directly into Windows for free. Now, this move completely suffocated its main competitor, Netscape, but it also caught the eye of the US government, which led to this massive, years-long antitrust lawsuit that basically accused Microsoft of being an illegal monopoly. So the company survived the lawsuit, but the fight definitely left a scar. As Microsoft entered the 2000s, this giant that had seemed totally invincible suddenly started to stumble. And the irony is, the very culture that made it so dominant in the first place, it became its biggest weakness. I mean, just look at this timeline. It's basically a highlight reel of missed opportunities. First, you've got the Zune in 2006, a failed iPod killer that was late to the party. Then, Windows Vista in 2007, an OS so unpopular people refused to upgrade from Windows XP. And then, in 2010, the Windows Phone, which was crushed by Google's massive app ecosystem. These weren't just bad products, They were symptoms of a company that had stopped leading and was just reacting. And a former Microsoft exec, Robbie Botch, really hit the nail on the head. He said their marketing message for stuff like the Zune was just confused. People didn't know what it was or why it was different. See, the goal wasn't to actually be better than the iPod, it was just to grab market share. And that old dominate-at-all-cost strategy just doesn't work when people actually have a choice. And that, right there, was the heart of the problem. Microsoft built its empire selling to big companies. The real customer was the IT manager, not you or me, so they were absolute masters of the corporate sale, but they were completely lost when it came to making products that regular people would genuinely want to use, let alone love. That old winner-take-all culture just smothered the creativity they needed to win people over. So the company was struggling. Morale was just rock bottom. They were losing ground left and right. It was clearly time for a hard reboot. And that reboot came in the form of a new CEO who brought a radically different vision with him. So in 2014, Satya Nadella takes the helm, and what he inherited was a company with terrible morale, just frustrated by years of losing. The culture was all about internal bickering and burnout. People were just tired of working hard on products that would ultimately fail. Nadella knew he couldn't just change the strategy, he had to change the entire soul of the company. And if you want a symbol of that change, look no further than this number: $7.5 billion. That's how much Microsoft spent in 2018 to buy a company called GitHub. And what's so wild about this is the sheer irony. I mean, Microsoft, the king of the walled garden, the company built on closed-off proprietary software, was now buying the world's largest open source community, a community built on sharing and collaboration. It was the ultimate pivot, the clearest signal you could possibly get that the old Microsoft was dead and gone. Which, of course, brings us to today. What a journey, right? From that relentless win-at-all-costs drive for market share to a totally new focus on collaboration and product quality, the company has rebooted its entire system. But the big question is still out there. In this new era, can the one-time king of quantity really become a true champion of quality? What do you think?